Jamie, I am super excited to share some time with you today as part of our Legacy Builders Unleashed video series. This is a series that is all about tapping into the entrepreneurial spirit and really understanding what legacy building means to each of us in our own entrepreneurial endeavors. So today, our topic is on building business value and creating a sellable business. So thank you so much for joining me. By way of introduction, this is Jamie Smith. She is co-founder and CEO of Amplify Advisors. So maybe you could just start by giving us a quick recap of your journey on how you got into the world of being a business owner.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So we actually worked, my business partner and I, with your husband at one of the big four firms, and that's where I met him. We had an opportunity to work on a business plan with that company that was actually very similar to what Amplify's business plan ended up being. And in the course of doing that, what we discovered is that there's a big hole in the market for small, medium growth businesses in the area of financial strategy. And so we decided to launch and fill that hole. We obviously have a great community of sophisticated big four, big seven, even financial strategy firms that help the enterprise clients here in Canada. But a lot of the growth businesses that are at a smaller level but have ambitious goals and are the top employers of our community were not getting served by the same level of financial strategists. And so we really felt that there was a hole in the market and something that we could be very passionate about. And so we left that corporate job and decided to start the business together. And my business partner runs Amplify Tech, which is where we bring Oracle NetSuite into growth businesses and help them with the technology side of financial strategy. And he's also our CEO and our CFO. And I run the other two departments, which is recruiting, where we place CPAs in permanent and temporary roles for all size companies, but definitely targeting that growth business. And we have the finance leaders service line, which is fractional CFOs, fractional controllers, and about 50% of those clients were actually fully outsourcing accounting and finance to Amplify and making sure that we're the whole function and department. I have the chief experience officer because client experience is one of the ways we differentiate and a big focus here at Amplify.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting hearing how everybody gets into the world of owning a business. And, so what does being an entrepreneur mean to you? When you hear someone say, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think to some degree I'm not an entrepreneur in the classic form where I didn't necessarily grow up, selling lemonade and always looking to be a business owner on my own. I was actually a fairly content employee and a very ambitious corporate player, and it was more an opportunity in the market that drove me to start my own business. So it's a little bit different than some of our clients who have been visionaries and entrepreneurs from the paper route days, if you know what I mean. But for me, I think that entrepreneurship is really an opportunity to control your legacy in regards to this video series and give back to the community in a way that is meaningful to you. And so for me, that's what Amplify has always provided. And I will say that I consider myself unemployable now. I don't think I could ever go back to being an employee, even though I didn't run away from that lifestyle or that job. I just, now that I've been here and done that, I don't think I could go back. But there's so many myths too about entrepreneurship. I mean, a lot of people go into entrepreneurship because they want more control or they don't want a boss. And I think my experience has been very much the opposite of that. I think that, you have an opportunity to give back to the community and live a purpose, but that doesn't translate to necessarily control. And because now you're accountable to even more people than you ever would have been as an employee. And so that doesn't bother me, but I think it's a big myth in regards to a lot of people's journey is becoming a business owner for sure. And if that control and that wanting to be your own boss and only report to yourself, that puts a real ceiling on how much your business can grow and what the value of that business could be. Not that that's not a great lifestyle choice, but it will have major limitations to what you can do in the world of business for sure.
Yeah, totally. The two things I always hear in the business coaching clients that I work with, or a question that I always ask is, how long could your business survive without you? And, that conflict or tension between control and freedom. And, so I look at the world of being a business owner, and I'm appealed by the ability to have freedom to set my own schedule, but also to have the financial freedom, based on how hard I work. There is no limit. But there is also that piece of, if you get stuck down that tunnel of control, then you really actually are limiting your growth potential and what the value of your business is worth. So maybe on that note, so you've worked with a lot of different businesses. Obviously, the lens is on the financial side. What are some of the things that you see that have a negative impact on a company's business value that, comes as a shock or a surprise to the owner?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One of them definitely is building for scale. And so you alluded to a lot of that, right? It's absolutely critical that you become replaceable within the business if you actually want to have a valuation that is meaningful to, whether it be, a nest for your next business or a nest for retirement or whatever it is that you're looking for in terms of exit. And frankly, even if you have no intention of exit, sometimes we get a little bit obsessed with the idea of exiting, when actually it could be a great long-term ownership or generational ownership too. But that valuation really does come down to scale in a large way. And so if you are a linchpin to the business, and you haven't made yourself more relevant and more replaceable each day and each year, then you're definitely sacrificing value. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of business owners, because they're intimidated to hire people that are smarter than them or better than them, or they don't think that other people can do it as well as them. But if you want a scalable business, that is absolutely essential. And it does come down to kind of those three stools of people, process, and technology. So you have to have that org structure designed where you can quickly take hats off. When you start a business, you wear every hat, but you have to have milestones, and you have to be getting rid of hats every day or every month or every quarter, whatever the case may be, or else you're not adding value to the business. And through that, you also need the processes so that each individual can be replaceable in addition to yourself, and that those processes are efficient and effective and help lead you to that growth. And then, of course, technology allows you to do it even faster and with more automation and with less labor and cost. So it's really looking at people, process, technology, and scale. And I think that's very, very hard, because the personalities of a business owner often crash with that concept of scale and control, for sure. And so that's a bit of a surprise, I think. And then in terms of business value, I think other surprises would be just, there's economic dependence. You often see business owners that really are dependent on, one client or one market opportunity, and haven't really seen the synergies to diversify. And a lot of times, with the same cost structure, the same labor, the same core competency, you could actually diversify either your product or service line, and that diversification adds significant value at very little investment. And so we see a lot of entrepreneurs either don't have that vision, or they're so busy chasing crazy yellow balls that are far more exciting than just small little tweaks to products and services, that they get distracted and they don't get that diversification. Instead, they launch and fail, launch and fail, launch and fail, a lot of new ideas that are super sexy and fun, but don't actually have a high probability of adding value. So I think those are a couple of the key things we see very, very regularly when it comes to business valuation, and surprises that they don't really understand what sacrifices they're making as business owners.
There are so many questions that I want to ask based on what you just shared. So that whole concept of being over reliant, and I always look at the lens of how reliant are you on any one person, so you as the owner, any other employee, any customer, any supplier, and the more reliant you are, that inverse and the negative impact that has on the value of your company. And a lot of times, when those big sales opportunities come to take, your top client and double with that, it's like, oh, how do you say no to that? Oh, I've got a a dog going crazy. Um, how do you say no to that, but at the same point acknowledging the incremental risk that you're taking on when you say yes and make an area that you're already super reliant in and magnify that. Um, so when you were talking about um, people, process, and technology, what are some of the process or technology, because sometimes those two go together, process and technology. What are some of so obviously you mentioned Oracle and some of the tools that you use. Are there other tools, particularly for, small to medium-sized businesses that you find really helpful to set the groundwork for growth?
Yeah, I think like one of the things we see if I take the opposite lens of that question is a complete over reliance of Excel, right? And that would translate even to back in my Big Four days where I only served enterprise clients and were constantly being sent Excel, which were big decisions and strategy on that. And that's not a scalable or frankly safe tool in a lot of ways. So Excel, don't get me wrong, I 100% agree that nothing is better when it comes to ad hoc analysis and being nimble and getting to an answer quickly. But I'm a big believer that if you're going to be doing something on a quarterly or monthly or more frequent basis, it shouldn't be done in Excel. Is kind of the blanket rule I state, and obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but that would be the blanket rule. If it's monthly, quarterly, or frequent, it shouldn't be done in Excel. You should be finding a system to help you do it in a more scalable manner. And in today's world, our smaller clients that aren't ready for the enterprise resource planning system like NetSuite, what we put them on is either QBO, QuickBooks Online, or Xero. And then the plug and plays that we use would be Fathom for financial reporting and on some forecasting, and then Dext, which is the payable software that's optimal character recognition, so it can read your receipts, etc. And then from there, figure out what other systems make sense for the particular business. But generally speaking, in today's world, there's a lot of opportunities to put in processes and automation that can make big differences and have controls and are easy for new employees to pick up because they're very user friendly. And a simple YouTube or a Google can get you almost any answer to use these softwares. You don't need extensive training and change management because they're designed for regular people to pick them up and use them.
That's so interesting. So in my own business, in the past couple of years, I moved from, Excel as my system, which was totally ad hoc, very manual and not super reliable and not timely at all, to using QuickBooks. And I'd say, the first year was a little bit bumpy, but man, once you get your process figured out, the insights and just that confidence of, okay, I know where I'm at any given time. I know what's coming. I know what I've committed to on both like revenue side and expense side. It sounds so simple, but it was such a game changer in elevating my ability to even see the path to growth.
Absolutely. And I think, even for us, when we put NetSuite in right within Amplify, our profitability changed drastically because we were able to get data that helped drive decision making and drove proactive decision making versus up until the point where we had that system properly set up and the right reporting, we were going based on gut. And the funny thing about growth businesses, small, medium businesses, is that generally speaking, their gut is what got them there. And it's a pretty awesome tool and a pretty reliable source. But I always say, once you get to a certain point, you can't have your finger on the pulse at the same level. Like gut can get you there when you're dealing with 10 clients, but translating that to 100, most humans, that's just not the way it works, right? And then in addition to that, sometimes you're still going to have the basis of your decision be gut, but now you have the opportunity to validate those decisions with data and question yourself and dig your heels in even more with what you would have otherwise decided to do. And or it could make you rethink and recalibrate because it turns out you didn't think about certain factors that the data and information is now at your fingertips to think about and reconsider.
Totally. Well, and I also think, as you build and your leadership structure expands, the whole people side of it, then you as the owner are just less involved in all of the pieces. So your ability to, trust that intuition, you're focusing on, usually big picture stuff, right? And so that importance of having that regular insight coming up to you that somebody else does, somebody else, takes care of, but you get the benefit of that insight to inform, where you go next, or even something as simple as, one thing I often find with a lot of the businesses I work with is they don't have solid payable processes. They don't have, and even more so, don't have solid receivables processes, and the thing I always say is, well, if you don't make collecting on your bills a priority, why should your clients? And, and they're like, oh yeah, wow, I guess you're right. But if you don't have the tools that let you know, oh, wow, like this big client just moved from 30 days into the 60-day overdue bucket. And oh my gosh, they're just about ready to move into the 90 days. Like, I gotta get on this and make it a priority. And you can't do that if you don't have access to the right information. I mean, that's on a super simplistic level. So thinking about businesses that you've worked with in any of your past, whether it's with the Big Four and your current, what are you seeing as some of the biggest success stories of a business that comes and is effectively able to upgauge and grow, whether they go through an acquisition or a transition of some sort? What are some of the kind of the lessons learned that you've had the opportunity to be kind of that fly on the wall and witness to in your journey so far?
Yeah, I think like some of the most exciting growth stories we've seen have really been those people that are very clear on the strategy and the growth, and they make their decisions based on where they're going, not where they are. So, when it comes to all three of the things we just talked about, process, technology, and people, they're really looking at, okay, what do we need when we get there and in order to get there, as opposed to making more constraint decisions based on where they're at today. And obviously that takes some funding, whether it be through getting equity or debt or bootstrapping, and it's a bigger risk because you're investing in something that's aspirational and it's not your current state and your current reality. But in order to get there, you do have to have those foundations and you do have to make those investments ahead of time, because where we, on the opposite lens of the question, where we see people struggle is that by the time they're putting into place the right people or the right systems or the right process, now they're bigger and they're more complicated. So that inherently, I mean, it can be done. And every day we're helping people that should have hired us yesterday. That's the truth of Amplify every day. They should have hired us yesterday. We're still going to be successful, but it's going to cost them more in terms of time, effort, and especially change management, because now they've got people who are going to dig their heels in on the way that things are done. And it's a lot harder and it starts to feel defensive and more hurtful and personal to make those changes, versus if you have a growth mindset and you really are investing in setting up in a practical way. Don't get me wrong, you need to be practical about it. But if you're making those decisions early on and everybody sees how you're constantly progressing, people get there faster and frankly, they get there cheaper. It actually costs less. And that's, a big difference between companies that end up having major stalls before they amplify versus companies that are consistently amplifying and hitting their goals over and over again. And every once in a while, even getting there ahead of time and excelling beyond their original plan.
Right. Oh, and that sounds so common sense when you hear it, but the conundrum of the business owner on risk versus opportunity, and future versus present is that
It's very
constant
difficult, because
struggle.
I would say, like, even I'm experiencing it right this minute. And so, of course, I have a history of being a consultant and being an advisor. And I'm looking at what we're doing with Amplify. And as a consultant and advisor, everything is happening exactly per plan. But as a human and as a business owner, I'm watching us actually decelerate in order to amplify. And it doesn't feel great. I'm telling you, it doesn't feel great to see you go a little bit backwards and slow down in order to get where we have to go. And that, from a human condition and a business owner who theoretically and textbook knows exactly what's supposed to happen and everything's happening exactly the way it's supposed to happening, that doesn't change the way I personally feel. And how I personally feel is, what the hell? Like, things are slowing down. We're a little bit, like, we're seeing a little less. But at the same time, the reason for that is I've made some big changes in terms of hiring and training and process. And so it's happening exactly per plan, exactly the way the consultant would tell me. The Jamie consultant knows it's right, but the Jamie business owner is feeling uncomfortable.
Totally.
And so a lot of times people abandon ship because they're like,
Yeah.
well, I'm slowing down. I can't do this. I'm going back to the way it was.
Yeah.
But then at that long term, it doesn't just slow them down, it literally stops them.
Well, and I feel like there's this step change, that there's, at every step up, you have to reassess the foundation. And, and a lot of times it means reorganizing and shifting people. And, what is the skill set you need now, which might not be the same as the skill sets you needed before, or the process or the technology, whatever it is. And so, like, every time you hit that next step, because it's not ever, like we always say, well, the trajectory, but it's not truly linear. Like, it's bumpy, right? Along that road. And when you're in that down phase, it's concerning and it's frustrating and you feel like you're spinning your wheels. But I'm totally with you. Intuitively, we know, okay, this is part of the process. But do you ever wonder if it's, when you're working with clients, you're that voice of reason for them to say, this is part of the process. Like, we have to go through this valley to get to the top of the mountain. But when you're living it yourself, you have to try to wear that advisor hat and business owner hat simultaneously. And that's where, you can kind of get caught up in that tension.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, obviously having a business partner, and so when I'm feeling that, then Jesse can remind me this is exactly how we
Right.
planned it. We're literally on plan, so he can act as that consultant advisor,
Right.
and then vice versa when it's more his area and department that's experiencing it, right? And I think depending on personalities, for us, certainly going back to the plan and knowing that it's happening per plan makes a huge difference for us and for many of our clients, but it depends a bit on the personality and what is going to give them comfort when they're experiencing that, right?
Totally. Yeah, totally. Um, So you mentioned the word strategy a number of times, speaking to my heart as someone who loves strategic planning. Um, what have you seen in either the businesses, like your own business or the businesses you work with, um, as an effective tool or process around really understanding what is that strategy? So you reference that we can get caught up in the current and, you know, be making decisions based on the current versus where is the future? What is the future state we want to get to? And then making investments and decisions based on aligning to that. So a lot of business owners that I encounter don't really understand, how do you come to discerning what your strategy is and what it should be? What's your take on what you've seen be successful for business owners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that works the best is to have actually a methodology, and most of the time to have a facilitator come into the business. Because I mean, even if you look at Jesse and I, who have previously sold strategy sessions, we have that capability. We absolutely need that facilitator, just as that person that keeps you on track, keeps you accountable, and then allows you to participate in a more creative way, as opposed to a facilitator who's
Yeah,
keeping you on track, keeping you organized, all the rest. So I think that the investment in a facilitator, no matter how big your business is one of the best investments that you can make. And then sticking to that methodology by and large. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can absolutely cherry pick and you can have exceptions, but stick to the methodology. And then if when you're going to have exceptions or deviate from the methodology, just make sure that everyone's on board as to why, and that in itself doesn't become the focus that you're fighting over the methodology as opposed to what your actual strategy is.
yeah,
I don't have a huge bias on which methodology gets used, because the important thing is to have one. And honestly, they're all great. So obviously we have tons of clients that use EOS, which is traction. We we love playing to win because we came from Deloitte, and that's the Deloitte strategy. I think Blue Ocean has some merit. I think scaling up, people are talking. A lot of our clients are using. I mean, I'm not sure which strategy you use or if you use your own, but I think the important thing is to just have a methodology, plan to commit to it. Where there's exceptions, quickly decide on that together. And all of that is going to accelerate your ability to set a strategy and to stick to it. And just having that person and that plan, that's the biggest win. And what that plan is and who that person is all going to depend on the culture of the client. And there's so many great options out there. But people think, well, I'm too small or it's too expensive. Absolutely not. You're never too small to have a strategy, and you're never going to get a better ROI than investing in someone like yourself to help to keep you on track. And then from there, stick to that plan. And most of the plans have more in common than they have different, let's be honest, right?
Totally.
And so it's about prioritization and making sure that everybody is doing something strategic along with their current day and their daily activities, which in of itself is somewhat strategic, but not as focused and not necessarily advancing the business
Right.
at the same pace, right? And so, and when there's exceptions, and there will be exceptions, like someone will quit that you didn't expect to quit. You'll get an opportunity with the client that's a hell of a lot more strategic to be responsive to than what you said on that quarterly day retreat, right? There's going to be things that change it, but it's that accountability and communication that this is worth changing the plan for. Here's the plan, and then these are the things that are worth altering and changing the plan, and making sure that that is transparent and that people are collaborating about that, right? And those are the businesses that actually achieve their goals, right? And they achieve far more, let me be honest, because we do find clients that are a little bit reluctant because they don't want to be stuck with a plan. They don't actually want to be accountable, to be honest, because they see themselves as creative or visionary, and they want to be way more nimble and responsive. And I get where they're coming from. And that is, at the end of the day, a lot of times the magic of what makes them a community member and what's making them revenue, to be honest. But that in of itself does not get you as far, and you're not going to achieve as much. So setting that plan, being accountable, and then, having the conversation as to when those creative, visionary, cool things come up and why they should become part of the plan or alter the plan still works for that personality, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, talking about methodologies, EOS is my preferred one, and what I found work really well with a lot of my clients. And I kind of blend strategic planning in with EOS. Some clients that I work with really just want the front end strategy, like help us facilitate, and get us a strategic planning, document of some sort. Okay. My personal take is you need a combination of strategy and execution, and like you said, whatever methodology you choose, EOS, I just find is it's very common sense. So people, who know nothing about what EOS is can get behind it really easy, because you hear the terminology and it's like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that. I maybe just called it something else. But what I found is when you can then add the technology component in, so for example, what I use with all of my clients is a software called 90.io, which is a licensed EOS software. So it's the EOS principles, but it's all housed in one place. And from a coaching perspective, it just makes our coaching sessions so much more effective. We know exactly what's coming up. We know what the 90-day priorities are. We know the issues. We know the to-dos. You can plug in all your data right into it. So it works really well. So I always think, how do you blend strategy with execution? And then how can you leverage technology to simplify communication and data collection? And even as simple as in my own business, I was finding, okay, so where am I tracking tasks? I was using Trello for project management. And then, whether it was, I moved from Google Calendar to the Outlook suite, and then I was having some stuff tracked in 90. And then I was like, man, this is really cluttered, where I'm going even on a daily basis. Okay, what are my priorities today that I need to time block and, and make sure I get stuff done? To then being able to say, oh, okay, well, how can I leverage the technologies I've already got, instead of using them at this level, use them, to a higher level capability, which most of them are built to scale. And then just figuring out, how to make that work for me. And that simplicity of, I've got one place, whatever it is, whatever tool you use, but that one place that keeps me organized, keeps my team organized. So I don't have to worry about missing deadlines, and I don't have to worry about, oh, did I delegate that task, and did she do it, and where are we at? Like, it's just there. It's the information is there, and so I found that super super helpful. So,
I think
question.
that like app exhaustion and then the scavenger
Yes.
kind of figuring out where things are is a real problem. And obviously companies that end up in that problem have the best intent because they're trying to scale and they're trying to automate, but it's something you have to be very cautious of. And I think your point is perfect. Like sometimes, we're picking a Civic instead of a Ferrari when it comes to apps and technology. And then the funny thing is we're driving that Civic with the windows open and not realizing where the air conditioner button is, like we're just
Totally.
not getting the most for what we have. And we certainly, it's a real concern with a lot of companies. And I think that people need to step back and even if it's a little bit less than perfect, using the apps that you're already invested in and your people are comfortable in is, it's better to have 80% functionality and not have a new technology
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I found. I even the coaching and assistance that I was employing, and I think even as a coach, as a coach, I still need a coach. As an advisor, like, who feeds into your circle. I think, we all need that circle. And what I was finding was there was just such a push to sign up for, this is the app that's going to be the be all end all. And I was like, I am exhausted. I have no desire to learn another app. So if that's your solution for me, this isn't going to work because I'm maxed out. I don't want another app I have to like reconfigure everything, learn, pay for. And yeah, so I totally hear you on that app fatigue. Hey, so changing gears a little bit. So how do you think financial records play into the narrative and the reality when it comes to building a sellable business, or being seen as a business that has high value?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have an exact percentage, but the number of opportunities where people have true chances to either purchase or sell a business, and they get, past the letter of intent, past a lot of the hurdles, and then the acquisition or purchase or what have you fails because of the financial records is astronomical, actually. And so and how defeating is that you've got the letter of intent, you can picture yourself in that next step, either as a business that's twice as big if you're the person buying, or maybe you picture yourself on the beach because you're finally getting out, whatever the case may be. You're picturing it, you're already living in that reality, and it's your books and records that stop the transaction from happening. And even sadder about that fact, of which I wish I had the statistic for you, but it's a very ridiculously high number. Within that, the number, it's not the actual financial results. It's not the fact that the financials suck or that it's not cash flowing or it's not profitable. It's the lack of transparency and the lack of the data that's the
Yeah.
problem. So the percentage which end up failing because of the books and records is huge. And then within that, the number that failed not because the actual business and the actual facts of which the numbers would tell is the problem, but the lack of those numbers and the lack of transparency and ability to audit or track what's actually happened. And the reality is, like, that's ridiculous.
Because
That's
it's so
crazy.
easy to fix.
Yeah, and if you and so you need to take it seriously because it will literally kill something, and it will often kill it kind of at the last minute, because at the end of the day nobody likes the numbers, like, except me, right? Most people hate them, so they will leave it till the end, and they're also doing that out of grace and trust, that they're assuming everything you've said is the truth and can be validated, and so they will leave it till the end, and so it will be a last minute. And of
Right.
course, What also happens when they don't fail is then they get in a position where they really are kind of stuck in that transaction. And now that valuation, instead of letting the transaction fail, they take some terms and conditions or total price, big hits,
Yeah.
big hits that don't make sense. They don't make economic sense. But you're at a point where it's like, well, I can't validate that I have those contracts, or I can't validate that I've earned that revenue, or what have you.
Right.
And so you kind of get stuck in two options. Either you completely abandon the transaction, which by then you've invested a lot, you've already pictured your future, or you accept terms and conditions or pricing that is not what you originally signed up for. And had that been at day one, you wouldn't even be in the conversation.
Yeah, the number of business owners that I've talked to, where selling wasn't even on their radar, but they might have, often received an unsolicited offer that sends them in a tailspin. And the amount of emotional capital that takes up. And one of the questions, that I go through, I mean, in doing valuations, it's not my area of expertise, but I do have a business health assessment, which will give like a ballpark estimate of value, and, kind of tie into some of the questions that evaluator would dive deeper into to say like, okay. And, the whole part of the financials, I think a lot of business owners think, oh, I'm not big enough. I don't need to spend the money to have, audited statements or whatever the case may be. And so they've got kind of a makeshift bookkeeping process. But then when they get to that, to that point, there's no reliability in the numbers. And the acquirer will say, well, I'm going to put a huge risk discount on your business because you can't, exactly what you said, you can't validate everything that you've told me. And so I now have to take on more risk if I want to purchase your company. And so the conversation I often have is, if you at all are thinking about going through an acquisition, and selling your business at some day, start the process now. Understand where your risks are, because you have, realistically a 3-year runway from the time you really start getting conscious about what you need to do. And financial records is a huge piece of that, because it's a rolling average. So you can't just, retroactively go back and adjust your financial records from 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Like, you need that runway. And a lot of business owners, get, exactly like you said, too far into that process, and then are left either walking away, which is very deflating, going back out to market, exhausting, or taking a deal that they're not super happy with and really isn't what was talked about in the original intent letter. And yeah, I just kind of look and think, wow, that's something that can so easily be mitigated, but you have to be proactive.
Yeah, and and it definitely costs less to be proactive. I mean, we can go back and come up with the numbers for you many years back without question. But the effort that takes and the amount that will cost you is just often not worth it, and it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But getting ahead of it makes a huge difference. And let me be clear too, unless you're bootstrapping a lifestyle business, where you don't need debt, you don't need equity, and you don't have an exit, like this need to have your books and records up to date is always the case for financial statement users. In terms of if you want lending, it's the same story, right? If you want investment at an equity level that's not an M&A transaction, but just an influx of funding, it's the same story. And then of course M&A, which we just talked about. So it's foundational to all of the steps to growth, right? And anytime an external party is going to help you grow, which most people need, some level of external, even if it's just basic, boring operating credit line in order to sleep at night so you can get your payroll paid, right? Whatever type of growth, from the simplest growth to the more sophisticated and extravagant growth, this is foundational. And then on top of that, let's say you don't need debt, you don't need equity, and you're happy to grow slow. You still, to our earlier point, need that data to make decisions. And at the end of the day, a business can be quantified. And so if you're not quantifying your business, you're missing a huge part of the story. And it's very, very common for people to neglect their finance and accounting area for a long time. We see it all the time. Like most of the clients that we hire have have a bit of a mess on their hands by the time we're involved. And the first step is to clean up that mess, which isn't fun for them. It's not, they don't see the value of the cleanup sometimes.
Yeah. Talk about the foundation. You got to lay that solid foundation before you can move on to the next piece of the puzzle. Hey, so as we wrap up, two questions for you. First one, what's next for you in Amplify?
So what's next for us is we have the three service lines and they're all continuously growing, and it's really exciting to be able to help with the recruiting and placing the CPAs in businesses, and help with that fractional financial leadership, and then of course NetSuite for the automation and technology. But right now we're largely a referral based business, and we're largely based in Calgary. So we really need to get out there in terms of Western Canada and beyond just a referral network. So we're putting a lot of effort into that type of growth, which is a huge step for us. I guarantee you that I'll have some failure stories. It won't be all roses and perfect, but it's exciting for sure. And that's something that we're working on right now. And I don't know exactly the timeline as to how quick we're going to go, and what players and pieces of the puzzle are going to get us there. But that's the hot topic here at Amplify for sure, is getting out of just the referral based Calgary market, of which we're insanely grateful for. But we want to be able to, in all honesty, prove our value that we can do it again and replicate it somewhere else, right?
Love it. Yeah. So that next level of growth and scale is higher on your radar. Awesome. Thank you. So second question, and the last one as we finish off, what is one piece of advice you wish you knew at the front end of your career?
Well, it's funny because we just did our 5-year video podcast on this topic of being a startup, and that question came up, and I'll repeat the one that I said then. I think if I were to go back and talk to myself 5 years ago when we started, I would have reassured myself that, you don't have to be in the delivery in order, like your business is going to amplify and things are going to be more profitable and better once you get out of the client delivery. So in our case, we're client service. And for the first 3.5 years, I was the CFO. I was the CFO of our first client, and I stayed in that contract and position for 3.5 years. And I'm not suggesting that I regret those 3.5 years, because what an amazing client, what an amazing opportunity. And it gave me credibility as a leader. And I don't know if any of my CFOs consider me credible if I hadn't done it. So I'm not suggesting that I didn't get out fast enough. But I can tell you, I was scared when I was getting out of client delivery. It was the first time in my life that I was going to take home a paycheck, not for being an accountant. And that was crazy. And by and large, was one of the first times I was going to take home a paycheck not for delivering client service, because the majority of my career has been in client service. So the idea that I was going to get paid just for being a leader, and just for being in charge of client experience, and just for like our brand and marketing, I was like, but I'm an accountant, like I'm not qualified to do any of those things. And so it was scary, and it was awful feeling. And now I look at it and I'm like, we have done so much better as a company since that became my focus. And I'm far better at those things than I am in accounting. And so bless the heart of anyone that end up with me as a CFO. It turns out I'm better at these other things.
Well, and isn't that just such a good way to cap off our conversation on the importance of building your team, so that you, as a business owner, right, can focus on the next pieces of growth. But if you're so in on that, like hands-on in the day-to-day delivery, you can't be doing 100% at both of those simultaneously. So you have to release one, which is scary. The whole concept of like entrusting that to somebody else, we talked about that earlier, scary. But when you can do that, the opportunities that rise up are phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that so many businesses would grow so much faster, and frankly, there would be so much less stress on those business owners if they just had the confidence and took the steps to do that. And it's been life-changing for me, and we have clients much better served because of it too.
Oh, awesome. Well, hey, I know our time's up. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and insight. I've loved hearing your story and learning more about Amplify. And I think there's just, I'm excited to hear how your expansion and growth goes in the coming months and years, and seeing that amplified name beyond the Calgary market and throughout Western Canada. So thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to a golf round at some point next season.
Yeah, next season now, sadly. Well, thank you very much. And thanks for all the work that you do with clients too. I know we serve a similar market, and it's really good to have people like you helping them out, because they're doing great things in the community and employing a lot of important people. And so they need that help.
Awesome. Well, thank you.